My name is Wally. I'm a professor here in the communications department. And
You're good. Technically, it's supposed to be.
sure.
Well, all right. Upstairs, it's not yet.
Anyway, and I'm director of our graduate program in communication. We have a master's degree in communication here at Spring Arbor that is offered completely and only online, and there's been much of my time involved with that program. And do teach some undergraduate courses, as obviously some of you know. So what is today, by the way? It's St. Nicholas Day. How many people's families do something with St. Nicholas Day? Anybody? What do you guys do?
We have stockings.
Uh-huh.
So we always, one of the things we always do too is like a tradition for some reason to kind of try and figure out each year what our story is for how St. Nick and Santa are related and are they the same guy.
Ah, okay. Good. Somebody else? Anybody else do St. Nicholas? I was getting my hair cut this morning, and the woman cuts my hair. She was all excited because today, St. Nicholas Day, they forgot to put the shoes out because they put gifts in their kids' shoes in the morning. But her little girl thinks that because today's St. Nicholas Day, they do it tomorrow morning. But actually, they're supposed to do it this morning. Yesterday was St. Nicholas Eve. We homeschool. We'll tell you a little bit about, my purpose today is to talk a little bit about this book, but more about the whole process of self-publishing, why you might want to publish a book yourself, and a little bit about marketing and some of the other aspects, the technical aspects of going that route if you're a writer, and most everybody is. And if you don't have a book you want to publish, you probably got a great aunt or somebody that does. So, maybe you can make them a book for Christmas or something like that. It's a simple process. I'm going to talk you through that process and how it turned into this book. So, to start with, I grew up believing in Santa Claus, of course, because, well, I did. Big deal in our house. I tell people that there was two really traumatic moments for me finding out Santa Claus wasn't real, although you'll find out that later I found out he was real, but the other one was finding out that Superman wasn't real. That was also a heartbreaker for me. But I grew up in a home that did this, and then we were homeschooling 4 children and involved in the community of fairly conservative people, many of whom didn't want to teach their kids about Santa Claus because, I don't know, because it might break their hearts, or I have no idea. But so I started to annoy homeschool mothers by telling their children that I was Santa Claus. And for a long time, I carried a picture of me with a reindeer around. And I would show it to these kids and say, look, see, here's me with my reindeer. And, or I would call home on the phone and tell them I was calling the North Pole, and one of my kids would answer the phone. And they would ask if I was really Santa, and they would say, yes, of course he's really Santa. And so this is to the consternation of some people who had a limited conception of fantasy, I guess. So I was kind of interested in it, and had been always kind of intrigued by the whole notion, but then began to be a little bit more thoughtful about Nicholas, the saint on whom the story is based, and began to do research about that. So before I talk to you a little bit about the research, a quick quiz. Anybody know what country St. Nicholas was from? There's a book in it for you. Anybody can guess? Yeah.
Was it Russia?
Nope, not Russia, although the Russians take Nicholas really, really seriously. He's a big deal over there. Anybody else know what country he was from?
I want to say Denmark.
No, well, Santa Claus. He came to America from Denmark, or from Holland, but that's not where he lived.
Austria?
But you guys are getting cold now. The answer to the question is Turkey. He was a pastor in Turkey. Does anybody know what century he lived in? Doesn't Paul make you memorize dates or something? What's the
Yes, I got that one, that's included, that will be included.
Did anybody know it? Well, you can take a guess. What century for Nicholas? 13th? No. He was just getting heated up.
Fourth century.
Oh, you win a book. Great.
Good. I already have
fourth-
it. Give it as a gift. It's a
The
great
fourth
stocking stuffer.
century Turkish pastor. And so, let's see, can somebody name 4 movies in which Santa Claus or St. Nicholas plays a prominent role? He doesn't have to be the lead, but quick, 4 movies with Santa Claus.
After Christmas.
You gotta do what 4?
Oh.
Santa Claus,
Santa
Night Before
Claus.
Christmas.
Santa Claus, Night Before Christmas? Is that a movie?
Yes.
Sure it is, okay, go ahead. He's in Chronicles, there you go, I'll take it.
And,
34th Street.
yeah.
Miracle on 34th Street, yeah.
All right.
But there's only one version of that that counts, but we'll let that go.
Why is that? Why is only one count?
Because,
Everybody's off.
somebody give me one of the names of Santa Claus or St. Nicholas in Europe. What's the name that he's called here? Yeah.
Interclaus?
Santa Claus in Father Christmas and quite a few different names in Europe that he has. And so I began to do research on this, probably read 10 or 15 books about him, and created a collection of stories, of files about things I would run across. I have sermons from the 12th century that were based on his story, whatever. We don't really know. I mean, a lot of it's conjecture, but there are some very prominent legends about Santa Claus or about Nicholas. Anybody know a legend about Nicholas that he's sort of famous for? Yeah.
That he put money in girls' shoes.
Money in girls' shoes, did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, girls is the operative word here. There were some daughters, and they didn't have money for the dowry, and the father was going to have to sell them and to pay debts or something like that. And so Nicholas is known for having paid the girl's dowry, and the legend says, and that's where we get the shoe thing, put the money in the shoe. So anyway, I had done this research, and then decided to write a book about it, since I knew more about Nicholas than most anybody else I knew. And in that context, I just couldn't get there. So I was on sabbatical, and which means you get a semester to go pretend to be thoughtful and scholarly and stuff like that. And I was down in Argentina pretending to do that. And I had all this material, but one night I just came to me, first person. I mean, first of all, you need to know that my grandchildren call me Santa. That, in fact, what you really need to know is that I am Santa. But besides that, I said, well, what about if I did the bird book in first person, and I started writing? And this was the very first paragraph toward the original manuscript, still survives mostly. It says, they got it wrong mostly. I realized nobody wrote it down until 400 years later. And, well, my own diaries and sermons were burned during the persecution under Diocletian. But I'd like to set the record straight after so many centuries of distortion and exaggeration. My name is Nicholas of Myra, and this is my story. And so this is a first-person account based on most of the legends and things that seem to show up often enough that you say there's probably some truth in them. And it's the story of how Nicholas became Santa. In fact, of the 6 chapters, he writes 2 of them after he's dead, but that's kind of a little fantasy trick that I did, so whatever. Terry's favorite chapter is the one where he slaps a heretic. So, thought I'd read a little bit about you. Do what?
Sounds like terror.
Yeah, I'll read a little bit of that. Yes, it's true, I slapped a heretic. I would do it again too, but when I first got out of jail, Arius was the least of my troubles. Many of us had been in jail a decade or more, so helping everyone get their property back was not as easy as just passing a law in Constantinople. Helping everyone get their kids back was even harder. both physically and emotionally. I spent a lot of time arguing with the magistrates, and I spent a lot more time comforting parents whose kids did not remember them. And the church was growing rapidly. Because of our persecution, many people were taking us more seriously. Hard times have unintended results, almost always good for the people of God. Constantine's own conversion also made it a fashionable thing to do. Jesus said we would have to sort the wheat from the chaff. He never said it would be easy. This was when I first noticed the children. They were so fresh and uncomplicated. I'd kick the ball around with them out in the street or sit and teach them old sea shanties or stories from the Bible. I discovered a piece of candy goes a long way toward a smile. But when the famine came, smiles were hard to come by. We saw it coming. The rain stopped, crops failed, the hunger began. In some ways, it was worse than the plague. Dying is somehow easier than wishing that you could. The worst part is that you feel like you should be able to control it, but you can't. We had money. Money was never the issue. Other churches even sent us money, a common practice since the times of the apostles. But what good is money when there is no bread? That's when the riots started. Down at the docks, the workers were hungry, tempers were short. Ships passing through had food enough, but not to spare. The seamen were full. The dock hands were empty. It seemed like every day there was a crisis to defuse. The troop ships were especially problematic. The soldiers would come ashore and there was nothing to eat or drink. They were often unruly and ungracious. Once I went to see some imperial officers insisting that they control their men better. They agreed to set some tighter rules and even pay for some of the damages, but while we were talking, I got word that 3 men were about to be executed. I knew they were innocent. In fact, I knew the magistrate had been bribed, so the officers came with me as I rushed to the square just in time to stop the execution. Okay, it's a little more dramatic than that. I actually grabbed the sword out of the hand of the executioner, just as it was about to come down on the neck of one of my church members. When the magistrate arrived to protest my interference, he saw the officers and thought he'd been found out. He confessed, and the officers arrested him and took him back to Constantinople. There's no telling what they said. Well, it doesn't really slap a heretic in this chapter, but I'm not kind of reading because I want you to buy the book. So, all right. So I wrote the book, and I want to talk now a little bit more about some of the decisions that were involved in that. And one of those decisions was just deciding to self-publish. So there were 2 or 3 reasons why I self-published this book rather than taking time for a publisher. And one of them is that it's actually part of a larger project on generosity, using Nicholas as an example of generosity. And there's a whole bigger book out there. And I just thought these chapters about Nicholas that were part of that other chapter that it might help the other project to kind of get it out a little bit, have people thinking about it and talking about it. So rather than going to a publisher with this, I did this, and it was fairly quick to do. It was probably 2 or 3 months before Christmas. I had the book available by St. Nicholas Day. And it's a really short book. It's only 48 pages. And there's several reasons to think, well, it'd be inexpensive. It'll be a great gift. It'll be a way to get people to think about the project, especially when the bigger project comes. It would have some recognition. That was some of the things that went into my mind in deciding to self-publish this project. So, there's not too much art, but I did buy this image of Nicholas, which is an icon. And I had to pay for the rights to use the image, of course. And I did that. I bought some ISBN numbers, barcode, all that sort of stuff. The service I was using would provide ISBN numbers, but I was working on a couple projects for other people and wanting to be able to publish those projects for them, so I just bought my own set of ISBN numbers. They're not terribly expensive, maybe $20 a piece if you buy them in bulk. So I bought ISBN numbers, acquired some art for it, and then I had it copy edited by some people, 2 or 3 different people. An important part of this process, one of the reasons self-publishing has such a poor reputation is a lot of people are self-publishing books that are really poorly edited. And if you want to do something like this, then make sure you get some people involved, get some other eyes on it, whatever. Even after the book was out, I found a couple things I thought, man, how did we ever miss that? And so you want to be really careful about that and approach that with some rigor. And then laying out the book. The service I use, you could use a lot of different formats, but the one that has the most control was InDesign. So basically, I just laid it out in InDesign. I was able to choose the font I want, the look I want, the feel I want for the book. Designed to cover myself, although the service provides makes that possible. And the service that I use for this is CreateSpace, which is an Amazon service. It's createspace.com. And it's much, much easier than you think. This is the dashboard, but if you wanted to add a new title, literally, it's a step-by-step thing. You walk through it. And they have some templates for covers, or you can insert your own photo if you want. They'll provide ISBN numbers if you want. I mean, it's not rocket science. Now, they'll also provide paid services. They'll for a set amount of money and everything, they'll do copy editing and all that sort of stuff. They do CDs and DVDs as well through this place. But when you get started with this, you just kind of walk through it and step by step create the project, and then that includes setting pricing. All sorts of stuff are things you make, decisions you make there. And the royalties are pretty good. I mean, compared to a traditional publisher that might pay you 8% or something like that, they're paying you 60% sometimes. It depends a little bit on how you set your own pricing. That makes the thing available. Through this process, you can make it available as a Kindle book, or you can also make it available as a print-on-demand book. Now, this book is print-on-demand, which means if you went to the microsite and ordered this book, it doesn't exist yet, but when they get the order, they create the book and mail it to you within just a few days. Now, in the past, if you did self-publishing, you'd have to pay a printer to print you 1,000 copies, and then they would sit in boxes in your basement until you died. But this way, you only have to have 10 or 15 copies at a time, or whatever you want for whatever purposes. And fairly inexpensive. I can buy copies of this. I can buy copies of this for me at my author's price for $2.25. It's listed on Amazon at $6.95 for the paper copy and $3 for the Kindle copy. So it's this is becoming easier and easier. And the reason I like CreateSpace, by the way, is you can do it practically free. My whole investment with Amazon, other than actual copies of the book, was under $30. Oh, well, plus I bought the ISBN number of the art. But I'm just talking about what I had to pay CreateSpace to make this book for me. So that's a little unusual in the self-publishing world, and it opens up more windows for us and more opportunities. And well, that's that. So. So those are some of the aspects of creating the book. And then, of course, you have to market the book. And that requires a little bit of plan, a little bit of budget, a little bit of whatever you may want to do in order to get people to notice it, because just because it's on Amazon doesn't mean anybody notices it. In fact, if you go to Amazon right now and type Santa papers, it'll show up because people have been buying it, but usually when you type Santa papers, you get wrapping paper from Amazon. Because it's not, it's not a famous book. So you have to put my last name in it. But they give you a microsite, which you see up there at the top right. It's just a site where people can go, and right there they can add it to the cart. I'd get a different royalty for that, a higher royalty for that than so if I send people to there, I get more money. If they buy it through Amazon as a Kindle book or as a print book, then I get less money, but not much less. I mean, Amazon's still fairly generous in their terms with authors who are self-publishing. But they do give you a microsite to market with, which of course then I created an email and sent to everybody in the world that I knew with a little coupon where they could get a discount. I created a postcard, sent it to everybody on our Christmas list. Perfect stock. This is a perfect stocking stuffer, right? It's like
It is.
inside your stocking and whatever. So we went through that thing with the postcard, and I have a blog. And if you follow my blog, you'll know that the last few days I've been shamelessly promoting my book. There's a recent entry, 3 Reasons to Believe in Santa. And today, actually, I put up a post on my blog. It's thedaysman.com that has it has the first chapter of an audio version of this. There is a CD version of this. It has me reading the first chapter, and you can hear that as well on my blog. So the blog was a way to do it. Facebook, obviously, I will not unfriend anyone, and I will let anyone be my friend, even if I've never heard of them. And the reason is because I'm an author and I want people to buy my books, and I want to on Facebook now and then say, oh, look, there's this, there's that, so whatever. So Facebook, I did giveaways. I gave away 10 copies through Goodreads. So you could sign up and check, and if you wanted to be entered in a drawing for a copy, and I sent 10 people a copy of the book that had signed up and were drawn.
I remember, Dr. Metz, last year I spoke at a Christmas event for the district Free Methodist pastors, and he was generous enough to give me a bundle of books, and they were gone. The pastors and their families came up and grabbed them, and hopefully they went out with their congregations about the excellence of the book, but it was something that was very popular at that event.
Yeah, interviews. I did a few radio interviews, and then special event. We did a reading here in the prop shop last year, and I sat in an armchair and whatever, drank coffee, and pretended to be Santa. No, drank tea, obviously. Pretended to be Santa, and actually read the whole book. You can read the book out loud in an hour. And that was the big deal because the university had contacted Detroit News about doing a story on something else, and they looked at the website and they decided not to do the story on the something else, who I don't know what that was. But they were kind of intrigued by that, so they sent a photographer over and a reporter. And on Christmas Eve last year, front page of the Detroit News, right in the center, is a picture of me sitting reading the Santa books, and an article about me pretending to be Santa, and about the book, and about why I think this is important. So, I mean, that's the kind of stuff you sort of hope for. And then, in addition to that, in terms of the marketing and planning, I've depended on my friends. This was just yesterday. Loretta White and 9 others shared a link. They'd all shared a link to the book, said they read the book, recommended the book, that sort of thing. It was helpful. Now, comes a moment of truth. I did a lot of marketing, right? How many books do you think I've sold? Well, here's a hint. I've given away more than I've sold. 50 books. 50 books. And you would think, wow, this is gold, man. Now, am I discouraged about that? No, because there's a concept called the long tails. Anybody ever heard of it? What that means is this book about St. Nicholas will be available every St. Nicholas Day for the rest of my life. And I know families already that have made it a tradition on St. Nicholas Eve to sit and read this book out loud with their kids. Now, that has the potential to grow, has the potential over time to add something. And why did I say at the beginning that I did the book self-published anyway? To help promote a larger project. So I'm not, it's whatever. I mean, I'd be happy if you all go home and buy a copy. But the point is that self-publishing is not a quick route to being rich and famous. I'm sort of famous. I mean, I'm Santa Claus, right? But I'm not rich. And it doesn't come from this. And you just have to understand that there's a lot of aspects of motivation, personal and and other things that may be involved in why it would be a good idea to self-publish a book. Remember your aunt that I told you that wants to publish her memoirs? You could do this for her. And the family would love it, right? I mean, these are things that's part of it, but it's also possible, you know, this goes a little farther toward a publisher of showing how serious I am about this project. And the best thing I have from this book is not the cash. The best thing I have from this book right now is the reviews. I have a lot of people say kind things about this book. In fact, Terry this morning on her Facebook, she says, set out your shoes, slap a heretic, and go buy this book, right? Because you got a Nicholas. So, I just want to make sure you realize that there are lots of other reasons to think about understanding this process and even use this process. And the long tail is one of them. Lots of things, you know, if I had 10 of these books and they're all making me $150 to $200 a year, 10 different books, I got 2 or 3 others I'm planning to put out this way. I have a collection of essays I did when we took care of my mother in hospice in our home. I just have a few other things that I think readily, because I blog, could come out of my blog and be put together in little packages that have the potential for adding, you know, hey, someday it'll be our Christmas budget, and you know, I got 10 grandkids, so it's nothing to sneeze at. So, anyway, what's next with this project? Well, first of all, thing that's left of this project is to finish it, because remember, this is only a phase of a larger project called Becoming Santa. I believe Nicholas provides for us a great example of a legacy of generosity. What does it mean to be remembered for gracious and generous acts? And I'm probably not writing as much for you, although I would hope that you would want to be generous, but I'm writing for my generation of boomers who are in a unique position to make significant contributions to other people's lives, because we're the richest people in the history of the world. Lots of boomers have more than any medieval king ever thought about. And so the Becoming Santa book intersperses these chapters, first person stories about Nicholas, with a collection of essays that are first person stories about me and my own coming to understand generosity, particularly in relationship to my relationship with my own father. In fact, there's only one chapter left, and I think I'm ready to write it, but it's easily the hardest chapter, because it deals with how my father's death touched me in terms of this particular issue of generosity. So remember, this is a piece of something for me that's bigger, and that's also all in a good reason for self-publishing. We do have the CD, which last year we had about, 40 copies of it, and there was some sound issues on it and everything, so we've had it remastered and got the files. I'd like to get that put together too, because I think that if nobody else, I'd love for my grandkids to be able someday to sit and listen to, you know, Santa, which is what they call me, read the story of Nicholas, and maybe you'll want your grandkids to read it too, I hope so. And then also, we're going to do a special topics class in the spring. I was hoping to announce the time of that class today, but don't have it. But I've been doing this partly to learn how it works, because I'd like to show some of you how to do it. So we're going to do a class in in how to publish a book. If you need to bring a manuscript, yours or somebody else's, and we'll walk through the whole process. And in the class, you'll have a manuscript. You'll have a printed book. And the model project for that is the university has a relationship with the University of Michigan, with the medical center there, a clinic that deals with brachial plexus, and they have a children's book, and we're going to turn that, as the class project, turn that book into both an ebook and a print-on-demand book. So, I'm done. Ask me questions.